Good evening. It's April the 23rd. It's 6:30 p.m. I'll call the Board of Directors regular meeting into session for Trophy Club Municipal Utility District Number 1, and the time is 6:30. Citizen comments. Ms. Slot, do we have any citizens signed up to speak? And we have no citizens in the areas, so we'll bypass that one. Consent agenda.
And we do have,
Check to see if we're actually getting recorded and that stuff.
Yeah,
You should-
yeah.
Oh,
Miguel said we're on.
and we do have a quorum.
We do have a quorum. The president is missing. Consent agenda. All items listed as consent agenda are considered to be routine by the Board of Directors and will be enacted by one motion. There will not be a separate discussion of these items. If discussion is desired, that item will be removed from the consent agenda and will be considered separately. Number 1, consider and take appropriate action to approve the consent agenda. Item A, March 2019 check register. Item B, March 18, 2019 regular meeting minutes. Item C, quarterly investment reports, second quarter fiscal year 2019. Item D, tax collections, second quarter FY 2019. Would anyone like to remove any of these for discussion? No interest in that? Take a motion.
I move to approve the consent agenda, items A, B, C, and D.
Motion to approve
I second.
and seconded. Motion was by Director Flynn and second by Director Chapman. All in favor, please signify. Opposed, same sign. Motion passes unanimously. Regular session. Consider and take appropriate action to approve Resolution 2019-0423A, adopting amended drought contingency plan. Staff.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. In your packets was a version of the amended drought contingency plan. We sent out a revised version of that via email last night to the board members. That's the one we'd like to work with. And in your packets here at the dais are some other changes that are being proposed for addition to Section 8 of that plan by Vice President Rose. So I guess that's, this is a document that has to be submitted to the state every 5 years. The one that was sent out on email last night reflects de minimis changes from the one that was submitted 5 years ago. And the staff would seek board approval to submit that for this coming 5-year period.
So, question. So I read the one from last night, and it looked like just the changes were the updating of appropriate titles, appropriate, board members, whatever. But I also hear you say that there are some changes beyond that that are here.
In this packet, our Vice President has suggested some additional changes. They're just on this one page, and they would presumably go under Section 8, year-round water management and conservation requirements.
Got it.
Correct me if I'm wrong, Director Rose, but it's my understanding that basically these are things that are in stage 1, and this makes it duplicate. Or we wouldn't want stage 1 to be looser constraint-wise than just the everyday restrictions. I guess that's the way I'm thinking about it.
Yeah, I'll speak to that.
Yeah, walk me through, Bill.
Okay, well, let me do this. There's a series of motions.
Okay.
Because there's some other issues that I've forwarded in that I want to talk about the basic document. So let me make a motion to approve Resolution 2019-0423A.
Second.
Okay, now, discussion. As I mentioned, there were some items in this, and if I have it pulled up separately, but if you go to the cover page on the document, or look at the cover page that you have here, what was changed on the cover page is the title was originally Drought Contingency and Emergency Water Management Plan. The Emergency Water Management Plan was removed. Actually, within the plan, down in, I believe it's section 5, it states that the general manager or acting general manager now may order the implementation of a drought response or water emergency stage when one or more trigger conditions for that stage is met, or upon notification of the city of Fort Worth. Again, goes in and talks about it. So effectively, the general manager or the acting general manager in the event of a water shortage locally, without Fort Worth saying do this, the general manager has the authority to implement it as an emergency water management plan. And so based on that, I would like to put the emergency water management plan back in the document. That's one. The other thing within this document, and you have a revision here at the dais, which changes, well, it's in the blue line, but also changes a section where it begins to talk about the acting district manager. It used to say he or she, other designated official by the general manager, that he or she may have designated. So we changed that over because in our bylaws, we now have an acting general manager in the case of the general manager's absence. So that brings this document into agreement with our bylaws and the way our organization is. The other thing that now I found later on, if you go down to page, this is going to be a small thing. If you go down to page 4, where we changed district manager to general manager, that's now not alphabetically correct in the listing, so I would like to move that on down to where below even the numbered addresses, so where it's correctly in the right place there. Now, the last item that I have is several places in the document. For example, let me get the page. I'm on page 10 of the original document. It's talking about all water users, and what we've done there is we changed district manager to general manager, standing alone general manager without a reference to the acting general manager. So what you wind up with is within this document, internally within the document, one place the general manager or the acting general manager can take an action, and then in another place only the general manager could take an action. And so what I went through is I went through and made the addition to allow an acting general manager to take those actions. And of course, he or she would only be doing that in the general manager's absence. So it's a cleanup. Okay? So let me make a motion to change an amendment. I move to amend the document to read drought contingency plan and emergency water management plan. Or let me rephrase that. Make a motion to have the document read drought contingency and emergency water management plan.
So we're adding it back in from what we
Leaving it in, adding it back in. Also, to correct the alphabetization of general manager. And lastly, to change those places within the document where it says general manager to general manager or acting general manager. That's my motion.
I'll second it.
Okay. Any discussion?
So I understand everything you said, Bill. This one single piece of paper?
Coming up.
Oh, it's coming up.
Next amendment.
Okay,
Yeah,
Never
don't want to confuse it too much.
all right.
Okay. Any further discussion on that amendment? All in favor, signify by raising your hand. Opposed? Amendment to the main motion passes unanimously. Okay. second thing I have, I propose an amendment to, and this is at the dais, I propose an amendment to Section 8, year-round water management and conservation requirements, to add the following exceptions. And I'm not going to read all of those because it's at the dais and in the record. If I get a second, I'll talk to it.
Second.
Okay, thank you. What drove this particular exception was, here again, I was watching social media the other night, and somebody said, oh, I'm going to resod my yard, and I'm going to be watering for the next 30 days. And I went, oh, I'm sure we allow that. Let me go find it. And I went and looked, and sure enough, I couldn't find it. So, came back to the basic plan, and went down to stage 1 triggers, and it has a list of exceptions down
Where
there.
are you reading
Okay,
from,
let me,
Bill?
okay, let me get down to exceptions here. I'm now on page, it's on page 8. It's where it's gonna be stage 1 response triggers, water watch.
Okay,
Okay, so if you keep paging down there, you will find exceptions. These are exceptions which are allowed under stage 1 restrictions. And as the general manager said, it seems unusual that you would have a normal operating condition, and then when you go to stage 1, you would be able to have exceptions which would allow you to do things which you could not do under normal watering conditions. So in a lot of ways, this is document cleanup, but it's certainly clarification on what you can do in normal conditions.
so, just so I understand, in the docket we're looking on, page 7, it starts with the exceptions under 4,
Yes,
as A through F,
yes,
correct?
yes.
The single page amendment that I'm looking at,
No, that's the one that's in there originally. He wants to do this section.
I understand that, but there's still A through F, and I haven't looked at all the words.
Okay,
Yeah,
But
they're
it's-
identical.
basically cut and paste.
Okay. Got it.
Any further discussion?
No.
All in favor signify by raising your hand. Opposed? Amendment to section 8 passes unanimously. We're now back to the main motion, which would be to adopt the drought contingency plan and emergency water management plan as amended. And I need to note that the secretary has amended the resolution to change the verbiage to make it also say emergency water management plan. Any further discussion? All in favor, please signify by raising your hand. Opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Thank you. Now let me get back to my main stuff. Okay, item 3. Consider and take appropriate action to award bid and approve contract number 2019-042301 for water line replacement on portions of Carnoustie Drive and Straight Creek Court as part of fiscal year 2019 capital improvements. General Manager.
Director Rose, in your packet, you'll find the bid documents as well as the staff recommendation for the letting of these portions of the contract. I believe they came in 3, I don't have it in front of me, but it came in 3 different segments. We feel like the granting these to the low bidder is appropriate in this case and would seek your approval. Just as a side note, I would let you know that The portion on Carnoustie Drive will be in the side yard of 1040 Trophy Club Drive. And that was communicated to the resident in the last 30 days by me. I pulled out the map and showed it to her and let her know that this project was coming. So,
I have a couple, any questions from anyone at this point? I have a couple of questions on it. One of which, I noticed that there's a mobilization cost for each section. If the bid is awarded to one contractor, do we pay mobilization for each section, or was it they were kind of in the same area, so
I believe that's the case. It's the bid as it came in, and so mobilization charges are usually at the front end. That may be negotiable, given that it's all one contractor, but at least, you know, when you think about mobilization, there are people bringing stuff to the site, equipment, that sort of thing. The portions on Carnoustie are on both the north and the south side of Trophy Club Drive. And I'm thinking that Straight Creek Court is a significant distance from there.
not far?
It's not far.
No.
So that may well be negotiable, but was put out to bid because it's,
Okay,
you know, per state purchasing guidelines.
Okay.
And we did it that way. So the fact that we have one contractor win them all is what it is.
okay. And I have one other question. I'm on page 60. DFW Services LLC. When you compare the bids between these particular companies, the DFW Services LLC had a whole list of notes and exceptions. I didn't find that under Raymore. Is that something that should concern us? Are we pretty,
I don't believe so. I'm not sure we've done work with the DFW group before.
okay?
I have seen bidders put in those kinds of notes and exceptions, and I believe that we have, you know, within our grasp. For example, if we have somebody come in and they're the low bidder by, let's say, 20%, we go back and ask them, look, did you miss something?
Yeah.
Just as a matter of fairness. I mean, if somebody's starting off already in a place where they can't do the work in a profitable way, it's not really a win-win situation. And so, you know, I look at that kind of language as caveats saying, you know, here's some, you know, reasons why if we find ourselves in a similar position that maybe we missed something. So they're trying to document their caveats.
Okay. Board.
That's a lot of them,
Yeah.
32 of them.
Yeah, it really, it was kind of, I've kind of looked at that and went, wait a minute, what, are we missing something here? What, in the motion, do we need one motion or do we need three motions?
If the motion is to award D3 contracts to Raymar, you can do it with one.
Okay. Someone like to tackle that task, or would you like me to wax eloquently?
Wax on, wax off, go ahead.
That's fine.
Okay. So I will move to award contract 2019-04-2301 for water line replacement on portions of Carnoustie Drive and Straight Creek Court to Raymar in an amount not to exceed $204,222.
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor, please signify by raising your hand. Opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Item 4, consider and take appropriate action to award bid for fence upgrades and approve contract number 2019-04-2303. General Manager.
Director Rose, thank you. I don't have a lot to add on this one. The bids for these fence upgrades are in your packet, and staff recommends approval. At least in one case here, we're talking about restaining an existing fence. You know, we've had good success with the group that we're talking about here, so staff recommends approval of this award.
We talked about this before, did we not, Carmen, about didn't parts of the fence, wasn't that owned by somebody else, and we were gonna either ask for
So,
permission at minimum and support, financial support at
Right.
maximum?
So Stephen can chime in on this one. He spent a good 2 months trying to get a hold of someone at AT&T. So if you're looking at this fence out here in the corner, the very far right-hand side, near the lady who has all the campaign signs on Election Day, there's a little carve-out, a square area where the AT&T, I think it actually, the original vault still says Southwestern Bell on it. It's the one that sticks up in a broken fashion, but they have a terminus there that I think fiber and old style 2-pair wires come into. There's a document on the original drawing for this site that shows that as an easement to both the town and the MUD, and that in their case we have the right to, you know, if we see something that's deteriorating in quality, we have the right to fix it and send them a bill. Determining where to send the bill with AT&T is not that clear, and you know, we could easily, for $2,000 in fence upgrades, end up spending more than that in staff time trying to figure out where to send the bill. Right, so, but that is not a part of this bid. That's part of the one that's already been constructed. The other element that you're talking about there relates to the meter vault, which is the kind of different looking fencing right outside our front door.
Right,
So that's currently the terminal point for Fort Worth water coming
that's
on
what I
site.
was thinking of, right.
We have had a letter written from our operations manager to Fort Worth on that matter. They have responded and said, well, we're inclined to just take the fence out and leave the electronics and other things to you know, to be open viewed. You know, I don't like that idea. Our agreement with them and the easement for the meter station is a different beast than the one we have for AT&T. I think at the end of the day, Fort Worth is on the hook to build a new meter station over by the intersection of the 377 and the 170. And I believe it's been a few months since I read that contract that they're required to do that a decade ago. They have not done so. And I'm going to be working on sending them a letter suggesting that, well, they can remove that fence and the meter station and all the electronics when they build that new meter station. But until then, they ought to let us deduct the cost of staining the fence that they installed around the meter station from our monthly bill, which is a few $1,000s. So that'll be the next volley in that discussion.
Okay. You'd like to entertain a motion, Mr.
I would
Mr. Acting
love to,
President?
I would love to entertain a
I
motion.
move to take action to award the bid, the fence upgrades, and approve contract number 201-904-2303 for the fence upgrade, not to exceed, I believe it was $34,100.
I have 33 for Alliance.
Oh, Alliance 33?
Yeah.
The 33,000, oh, sorry, $33,000. Thank you.
Do I
I second.
have a motion and a second to award the contract to Alliance Fence Company. Any discussion? No further discussion. All in favor, please signify by raising your hand. Opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Item number 5.
I guess when you're acting chair, what's the proper reference for me to make? You're Director Rose and you're Vice President of the board, but as the gavel holder,
Hey, you?
how about Director Rose? And Director Rose, I mean,
Item number 5, consider and take appropriate action to approve engagement of Weiss, Janey, and Eister Associates Incorporated for crane inspection services at the wastewater treatment plant.
Let me kind of explain this by saying I had a face-to-face meeting with our construction litigation attorney in this matter. It's been subject of discussion by this board going clear back to December when I first brought it to their attention that there was an attempt to put in 6 inches of shims on top of one of the support columns in the second of the 2 cranes being installed at the wastewater treatment plant as a part of the Weber-Cadagua Pepper Loss and Water project. There's been a lot of dispute between our engineer and our contractor in this matter. And in my discussion with our construction attorney, Matt Sullivan, he suggested that we take a look at invoking section 14.05 of our contract with Weber-Cadagua PLC / Pepper Loss and Water. I think PLW is technically their name now, the group that we're dealing with. Under section 1405, we can call a third-party inspector to evaluate the workmanship, determine whether it's defective or not, and state an opinion as such under the contract. If the third-party inspector comes in and says, nope, the work is not defective, then we have to eat the costs of paying for this third-party inspection. If, in fact, they come back and they state that the work is, in fact, defective and provide a recommendation for fixing it, then the contractor has to both eat the costs of this contract as well as pay for any upgrades that are specified during that process. This firm, Wiss, Janney, Elsner, is well known in engineering circles as an expert witness in litigation cases that come in front of different courts throughout the state, but that relate to construction. And in particular, a lot of steel construction. So they're well known for their expertise in that area. That includes geotechnical aspects of steel structure construction. Staff would recommend that the board engage Wiss, Janney, and Elsner Associates for crane inspection services. I'd like to get them a notice to proceed tomorrow morning.
Discussion or motion?
Discussion. Costs, Mr. Carmen?
Say again.
Oh, that's all again.
On the third page,
Third page, got it.
this one.
Yeah, so you should have in front of you a copy of the principal investigators' resumes, as well as a proposal that was received this afternoon.
It's the black and white.
Do you have any sense of value of the crane itself? For example, if it was necessary to replace that crane, do you have any idea what it would cost us?
I do not.
29.
It is something I can get, but we are near the end of our contract amendment number 5 with CP&Y. And so I'm trying to be delicate in my use of their engineers and inspectors' time in this process. You know, originally amendment number 5 was to get us through, I want to say it was through January or February. You know, we're now heading into May, and they've done a good job of, you know, kind of pulling back on staffing it on a regular basis. So, you know, it could be that we have to go out and get that cost estimate. My guess is that they're going to come back and say, you can fix these defects by doing X, Y, and Z in this report, and that the cost of doing that would be on the contractor. That, of course, presumes that they find this work defective. I find it defective, but I'm not a professional engineering inspector.
But you are an engineer. Okay?
You're looking for a motion, Mr.?
Motion or further discussion?
I'll do it. I'll
Good,
give it a
here,
try.
read this one. You wrote it up for me.
I'd like to make a motion that we that we approve the engagement of, don't hit me, Weiss, Janney, and Elsner Associates for crane inspections at the wastewater treatment plant, not to exceed $29,100.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Further discussion? I have one,
If I might add, this came in, the proposal came in late this afternoon. It's my intent to negotiate on some of those time elements in the proposal. So I appreciate the not to exceed amount, but I do intend to quiz them a little bit on how much time they've got allocated to certain tasks.
I want to just make a comment about this in general. We're talking about a crane that's used to hoist very heavy items out of immersion in the plant. And I see a safety factor involved here for our operators out and around this crane if they should be using it and it were to fail. So I don't, this is a safety factor for me. So, any further discussion?
Yeah, just with the term shim annoys me to no end, and I can't believe that they forcing us to go to this level. I mean, it should be like engineering 101
Yeah.
on that kind of stuff.
Solid meeting.
Yeah.
No further discussion. All in favor, please signify by raising your hand. Opposed, same sign. Motion passes unanimously. Item number 6, consider and take appropriate action to approve Resolution 2019-04-23B, amending fiscal year 2019 budget. Staff.
Vice President Rose, let me turn this over to Stephen, who is with us today. We're happy to have him back after missing one board meeting.
Usually you call him your wingman. He's literally your wingman.
I would point out to all of you that he tied his own tie today, so I felt like I had to put mine on out of sympathy.
But how?
That's got to be
You can
miserable.
tie a tie without it being on your neck. That's the easiest way of doing it. And then just slip it on. Same way you put on a shirt. Really slow process.
I'll defer to our finance manager for any questions that come up over the budget amendment that's in your packet.
All right, so I'll kind of start off. Basically, we are halfway through the fiscal year, and this is the time to reevaluate how our year-to-date is and where we're projecting from revenue and expenses. So I sat down with Carmen and Mike McMahon, and we sat down and looked at where our expenses are and where we're projecting to go going forward. There are a few items that we did not receive to be in the budget, did not budget enough. And so we can either go, there's not many of them, so we can go line item by line item, or if you want to do it collectively, however the board would like to do it, I can do it that way.
I would like you to walk it through line by line because I do have some questions.
Fair enough. All right, so I try to make it simple. I know the print's fairly small. I'm sorry about that. So hopefully you guys can zoom in on your screen there. We'll start with everything highlighted is what is some changes are going to be made here. So we'll start with this is the revenue section is in the very first section. So interest income, we budget conservatively when it comes to interest rates. Two different things come into factor here is one, what the current interest rate is going throughout the fiscal year, and two is how much money is being interest throughout the year. So two factors played a factor here as being conservative, that the interest rates are a little bit higher. They keep getting better, which is a good thing when it comes to tax pool, where most of our money is being put at for the reserve side of it. And that, we haven't depleted our reserves, so they just keep building as we go along. Now, our interest is a little bit higher in the beginning of the year because we do save money aside when it comes to paying bonds that we project to get. So in August, when we pay our bonds, that's when a lot of our accounts kind of get drained out when it comes to the bond accounts. So right now, we're just collecting interest on those until it comes to that time. Next one is proceeds of assets. We actually got more back on the vac truck than we projected. So we don't plan on being really much anything else besides scrap metal coming forward. So most of everything we've got is going to already be in this account now. So I want to go ahead and adjust this account because we were able to get quite a bit more than what we predicted the auctions were going to come back as. Any questions on that one? All right, next one is really not a budget amendment.
Can I ask you, I'm sorry,
Yes.
can I ask you a question? So on that, we budgeted 10.
Mhm.
The amended is 55 for a change of 45.
Correct.
Got that. So in the far column, or the second to the far from the right, 52,600, what does that represent?
That is the year to date. That's where we stand as of the end of March. So it leaves us roughly, 2,400 left for the end of the year where we'd be 100% at. So we really don't plan on selling much more when it comes to this. It's really gonna be a scrap metal if we do that, you know, before the end of the fiscal year.
Okay.
So we don't plan on there really too much more in that account. All right, going down the miscellaneous income, this is just gonna be a transfer. So, right now, if you look at, there's 9,600 miscellaneous income. I hate miscellaneous. It's a horrible concept for an accountant here. So right now, there's money in there. It's an offset that's gonna go into the, maintenance and expenses on the other side. So it's gonna be an offset. So I'm gonna make a transfer next month to reduce that year to date. That's what I'm
What
gonna
is JE?
do. That's a journal entry.
Okay.
Even I got that one. I got signed stuff, and he's
Spent
walking
year-
me through this stuff. He's schooling me.
Yeah, but I spent a year as a treasurer and don't recall
You
that,
didn't
so
get it,
would-
see?
I didn't get it. Moving on.
We get a few more 101s. We had to start from the basics.
Yeah.
All right, so moving on, going down, we have maintenance and repairs. So one of the big things that happened here is the settlement that was agreed upon here shortly. I guess it was a few months ago now. So we need to put that back into the budget, so we can show that, because right now that has to go under maintenance and repairs.
Okay.
Before we have that, yes.
Okay. And I would, I don't know how to address this at the current time, but I don't believe that that item belongs there. I think that money should come out of reserves, because a vibrant reserve policy would have an emergency reserve section, and under that would be talking about insurance. And this is an item that would not have been covered under our insurance policy and would therefore would come from reserves.
Correct. I think if we had a new current reserve policy, this would have come out of there, but as of the current reserve policy that we have stated, I don't really have a way to pull that out as anything we have stated now.
I can help you by a motion, I'll bet. Okay.
Mr. President, I would just add to that, we'll do another budget amendment at year end, in which case we can do a JE on our due to, due from, whatever that means. And if by then we've changed our reserve policy, we can locate that in a different place if we want to.
Okay. Because, I mean, currently the policy is just basically a bucket. And so what I was looking at is I can just reach back into that bucket and
That's it.
say,
It is where it's coming from, is from reserves.
yeah,
But technically, the bucket is not an expense, so it's just an asset. I would pull the money out to put into an expense line still. So I have to plug it in somewhere as an expense. So I would have an offset as a revenue coming from reserves, but still as an expense.
yeah,
So it's just a moving funds around type of thing, but.
exactly.
All right, and then, once again, that JE that we talked about in the revenue will offset that one, so what we recommend is a $53,000 difference. That's the only thing we recommend is making up for the settlement part. And we're gonna move down. So this is gonna be coming to similar to what we just talked about here. This is the VFD that was approved upon. That's gonna be coming out of the reserves. This is the increase of it for the 266,613. So we're gonna have to put that in capital, because I have to increase the capital outlays for the year. And I'm gonna have to make that an assigned fund, so which just means moving funds around in our account, but it's gonna be coming out of reserves.
And I think that was in the motion when we did that.
That's correct. That just hasn't been moved yet, because I was gonna wait until we actually got everything done, and then I can see exactly what we need to move out. So that way, if it's a little bit less, then I don't have to move as much. Moving down, we're gonna go into maintenance. Now, that was all in water, so we're down into maintenance and repairs and wastewater now. So this has to do with the exposed creek, the piping in the creek that was fixed. So this is something that we obviously didn't have budget at the time. So this is where this would go, as maintenance and repairs. We could do the same similar thing if we wanted to pull it somewhere else, but at the end of the day, it would come in the maintenance and repairs suspense line of forward 20.
I have a question on that one.
Yes.
The fund is currently at 98.64% expended without the adjustment. What does the addition do to the remainder of the year? What do we look like? If we make this adjustment now, are we still gonna be short? I mean, are we adjusting it enough to continue the next 6 months, or are we only adjusting to bring it current now?
So as far as, I sat down with the wastewater superintendent and with Mike, and as far as they're concerned, that would be enough to cover what's remaining for the rest of the year.
Okay,
That there wasn't-
Although I would add, in those cases, these repair sort of items, we take a kind of look back over a couple of years when we're budgeting that and say, well, on average, we have this many main breaks, and so we're gonna have this much in repair costs. That doesn't preclude a year where there's a lot of freezes and thaws and we have a bunch of them, or a mild winter where we have none of them. And it can result in the end of the year, being at 10% of budget, and some board member asking us, well, geez, you guys can't do a better job of budgeting than that.
I understand that.
It's totally possible.
I'm trying to balance out current versus future.
Yeah, it's really just, I mean, I hate to say the word swag, but it's really just saying, okay, hypothetically,
Okay.
this is what we think we're gonna do based on the past history, but at any point in time, there could be a abnormal month that, this is obviously the wastewater side, but especially happens on the water side. One main break happens, you've got 3 or 4 before you know for the end of the month, and then that account went from 10% to 99%, so.
I understand.
Next one is gonna be maintenance and heavy equipment. This is something that was missed on the budgeting side. We unbudgeted the Traco maintenance on there. So we had to update this. It's $5,500 for that, so this would bring everything up. All the other maintenance has been done, so they're confident with, once we add that we're gonna be good to go. And then this is we're going down to capital outlays. Now, this is a little bit unique situation here. So when it comes to the asset side, so we went out for a short-term loan here, a short-term debt, for the vac truck that we purchased last year. We got the assets in the escrow account at the end of the fiscal year, but we didn't actually collect on the property until this fiscal year in November or December. So therefore, we got the money last year to pay for the item, but not the expense side. So last year, if you remember in the audit, we were actually high the amount of the vac truck as an extra asset, but no offsetting expense for that. So now this is the offsetting expense that's being carried over to the new year. It just happened to fall that way, where it fell between a 2-month, 3-month category when we got the money, and then it took a little longer to build the item than you had to build it on the chassis. So then it kind of carried over to this year. So it inflated the capital outlays. As you can see, it's heavily, it's over capped out. So we want to make an adjustment to show that's being the offset. So 1 year, last year being high in the asset, this year is going to be expense side now. So it's going to, and at the end of the day, it nets, but we have to show it this way.
Okay.
And that is everything that I have. Any questions on any of those?
Go
Yes, sir.
ahead.
Just a question for me, Stephen, and maybe you don't know. I had Director Flynn ask me a question about the apparent year-to-date kind of below expected revenue on the water side. Do we ever make a budget amendment for missing on the low side a water revenue projection? Has that happened during your time here?
We have not since I've been here, but we have a unique situation here. So, and I did the math, I ran all the numbers here. So, and we can talk about this, and I guess we're okay to talk about this on this situation right now. So I went ahead and plugged in all the numbers and did my spreadsheet on where we are standing. We are about 120 million gallons shy from what we projected we were going to be at this time of the year from budget. Now, that's only one side of the story. There is what we think consumption is going to be, and then what the actual revenue being brought in. So it's a really a weird situation, because every month I know exactly what we sold consumption-wise for water. But when we bring in from UB, what the revenue comes in from UB is not for that given month. So they're not a direct relation to what water we sold that month. Because we're getting, so in October, we're getting the consumption for September. We're always behind collecting.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
So the money that we got in, the revenue that we got in for October was significantly less than what we had budgeted, because we had, if you remember, go back to September, we had a very wet September last year. So we started out this year fairly low. We were about 60 million gallons less than we thought we were going to be. And then revenue-wise, we were about, I think it's right about $70,000 difference. But in the same relation, UB is a thing that not everybody pays their bills on time. So we could be 2-3 months, and there could be a big account, which we have happened this year. Even the town called and asked about it because we collect for the drainage and refuse and everything. Where if you get a big account, one of your top 10 accounts who's 3 months behind, all of a sudden in 1 month they catch up. What happens? Your numbers inflate quite a bit, so it looks bad to begin with. We are actually, if you do the math on everything, we are 9% lower in consumption for this year than we projected in the budget. Okay? Now, 9% consumption is not hard to make up the second half of the year compared to the first half. So if you're short this half, I'm okay. If we get into June and we're still 10% short, then it's a little harder to make up.
But didn't you also say, when we talked about this, if we looked at the end of April on average, looking in years past, we should be somewhere, I'm remembering the numbers we talked about, like 34% or
Yeah,
something.
so this year, every year that changes because it depends on what we have budget. So the number of meters that are out, the number of connections that are out there, what we budget and what we predict that each person's going to use on average their rates. Everything's a tier, so I have to predict what the average tier is going to be for each one. What size meter? Because then you have fees and everything for the meter, the base fee. How many people are going to be late each month? I mean, all these things have to take a factor in what we budget, what revenue's coming in. So consumption-wise, this year we should be at 31 to 32% right now for the year.
We're at 27.
We're at 23. I'm sorry, you're correct. It should be at 30. I'm sorry, I read the wrong amount. We should be at 37%, 36.8, and we are at 27 right now. But if you look at the revenue side, we are actually 2% over in revenue.
Big
So-
users are using the water.
So what that means is when I'm projecting what users are going to be what tiers, we have more higher tiers than what I budget to begin with. And we have people who are in customers that are catching up from months that are behind that are catching up now. So across the board, even though we're shy on consumption, I'm actually 2% off on revenue projections in the positive. So, I mean, I'm confident where we are and what we're looking at for the budget. A long way of saying it.
Mr. Vice President, my recollection was that September and October were the wettest September and October on record at the DFW airport. So they were certainly extreme weather months.
Yeah, our two biggest loss consumption-wise, and as far as being negative, were October, which is going to be September's, and then going into November. So, other than that, we're actually fairly close. I mean, from what we projected we're going to be. So, consumption-wise, we're not too far off. I'm not too worried about, especially since our revenues is looking strong, which means that we've just got a few higher tier customers than what we projected. And granted, you know, we're known to be a little bit conservative on that side for a reason. We don't know what the weather's going to be like. So I think we're tracking fairly well as long as we don't have an abnormal wet summer coming forward.
Anyone else?
No.
Okay, I have a small issue if I read the numbers correctly. And my issue is that the revised or the amended budget is a deficit of $281,877. I don't approve deficit budgets.
That has to do with the carryover with 330,000 coming from the vac truck. We
Is
were
it
positive
there or
coming
is it not there?
It's there in reserves, but it's not there in what we're collecting for this year. So
Okay.
as I said earlier, we were actually high last year of that 330, or I have to get the full number, but around 330, versus this year we have to carry that around now.
So my thought process says I do a transfer of funds at this point from reserves to the budget so that it zeroes that out.
Yes. So we have done that before. I try to make it as clean as I can. I actually reach out to the auditor because it's a unique situation having the cash asset at 1 year, but not having the actual product the spend side on there. You know, it's not normal to go ahead and show, since we had a positive last year, to go ahead and show the negative this year in those accounts basically. Now I can do which we had done before. It's a prior year reserves basically, showing that the money came in last year as an offsetting revenue is what it would be, which would then put us in the positive.
Okay, so if we move $281,877 across from reserves, does that impact the $53,000 that, in my mind, should have come out of reserves to begin with?
So if we want to do that, what I would do is make this as clean as I can, is I would take the vac truck difference, and then I would take the 53,000, because really that came out of the reserves there, and bring those over together, which would bring you about 400,000, just so we can show what exactly we're doing.
Okay, so exactly how much do we need to bring across from reserves? And it would go into, there's a line up there, I believe, that
There's a
talks
prior year reserve. It's really not a line item, it's a plug number up here.
Okay,
It's the
let
very
me-
last line item in the revenue side.
Let
It's
me
just
get there.
135
Let me
and
get there.
zeros.
Let me get there. Let me get there. Okay, so I'm back page 78 on the revenue. And it comes out, it goes in, I thought I had one that had it, but I don't see it now. Where does it go?
Recovery of prior year expense.
Recovery of prior year expense?
Well, we have the reimbursement from 2.2. We don't really have a fund. We have a prior year reserves up here in 49,035 if you want to go that route, which is right under
Yes.
proceeds of sale of assets.
That's what I was looking at, either prior year reserves or GASB.
Right.
Okay, so is any of this discussion, these things coming across, would any of those be GASB items?
So the GASB would be, we talked about doing the VFD because it is going to be a replacement.
Okay,
Let's talk about that one for just a second. Will we not generate the high service pump station project that started off with, I want to say it was a 2016, maybe I'm off by a fiscal year, a 2016 year budget item for $335,000, to which we asked the board to amend that budget up to 600 and change, which I think is reflected in this document, the difference between those two. But if we spend all of that by the end of the year, we have 600,000 in expenditures, but only 300,000 in this budget. So maybe at the last of the year, we'll have a similar imbalance, if that makes
So
sense.
we carry money over every year. So when we finish a project out, let's say we finish a project out that we've been carrying over for 2 years, the capital is going to be higher. Now, when I do my assigned fund is going to be correct, which I did the GASB for the end of the year, the assigned funds. Those will be corrected in the year, but our capital will be inflated because it's money we've been carrying around. It is a prior year reserve or prior year expense covered.
so my question for my finance director is, what are the correct numbers that I need to amend this budget amendment with under prior year reserves and GASB reserves to get the document to zero balance at the bottom?
Okay. You want to do zero balance, or you're just looking to do the complete offset what we're looking at now?
I don't adopt a deficit budget. The money comes from someplace.
We have a resolution written up for this. It says resolution.
It's before this in the packet, there's the draft resolution.
Yeah.
You're going to change sources of funds in
I'm
that
going,
res-
I'm going to amend that line item.
We're not formally transferring monies to this action, he's just amending the draft budget amendment to provide for a transfer of retained earnings from last year. But this doesn't actually physically move money.
Correct.
So, but it doesn't change this resolution then.
No, it's gonna change the exhibit to the resolution, so I
Yeah.
think he's going to say, approve the amendment as set forth, subject to the addition of X dollars on line item, yada, yada, yada.
I was just going to change that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I can't believe you wrote a resolution with yada, yada, yada.
And he charged us
We learned that
a
in
bunch
law
for it.
school. That's Latin. Bill, I'll ask you, how are you determining what portion goes in the GASB versus prior year reserve?
It's where it's coming from, right? This is,
Both of them ironically are prior year reserves.
Well, the VFD, so the 266,613 is going to be coming from the GASB. That is one that was approved by the board a few months back.
do that again. GASB's going to be what?
266,613.
266,613.
That's going to be coming from GASB. That's actually coming from the true reserves. The other ones are going to be coming from just prior year reserves from what we've already collected.
Okay, and how much is that?
That's going to be 358,600.
358,600?
That's for the vac truck. So that one's going to be prior year. And then we're going to have 53,000, which is the settlement. So that one's going to be completely different.
Where is that coming? Well,
Right now, I have it just increasing the maintenance. That's how I have it
okay,
here.
but if I put those numbers in prior year reserves as amended, showing revenue coming in from those, correct?
Correct.
If I put that in there, those totals are over $600,000, and I am trying to amend a number at the bottom, which was what? Where'd it go? Let me get down.
200 and some. I'm just trying to be consistent. It's 281, 877. But if we're going to do this for one, I'd rather go ahead and do it across the board so we can be consistent with it.
So rather than have a zero budget, we would show a surplus.
That's correct.
At the end of the year because of the transfer.
Yeah, we had a surplus to begin with, which was 341, 837 to begin with when we adopted there.
Okay,
But we would have a surplus to go ahead and do these if we want to show how to true up on these.
okay. So then the recommendation would be to amend the budget. Okay. I can't make an amendment till we have the main motion on the floor. I guess.
I move to approve resolution number 2019-0423B, amending fiscal year 2019 budget.
I'll second.
Have a motion and a second. And now I move to amend the general fund budget amendment FY 2019 prior year reserves to show an input of $358,600 and also amend the GASB reserves FY 19 amended amount to be $266,613. I have a second?
I'll second.
Any discussion?
Looking for my finance director to nod his head that that's the correct numbers.
And this would give us, at the end of the year, gives a surplus of 343, 336.
But the numbers he quoted in the amendment are correct, right?
That's correct.
Okay, any further discussion on the amendment? All in favor, signify by raising your hand. Opposed, same sign. Motion passes unanimously. We're back to the main motion as amended. Any further discussion? No further discussion. All in favor, signify by raising your right hand. Other hand. Opposed, same sign. Motion passes unanimously. Okay, that takes us to item number 7. Consider and take appropriate action regarding the March 2019 Combined Financials and Variance Report.
Well, I gotta tell you, I'm a little disappointed, Mr. Rose and staff. I had this whole speech prepared for this item, the combined financials regarding the water sales variance. I stood up in front of the mirror, talked about it, gathered a little crowd into the house, talked about it. The fact that the crowd was my 2 dogs is irrelevant. I was ready to go, but we've already talked about it. So my main discussion point has been talked about, and that was my concern for the water sales, and so we've already talked about that. Everything else seems to be in order.
Yeah, I would comment and say, it's really interesting because when you start getting into forecasting water volume and water sales with the tiered water cost, it becomes really interesting because, it takes a lot of people to use a little bit of water, but just a few people using a lot of water skews things off the top. So it's a very interesting dynamic to keep track of who's in what basket.
I do want to say, the first full year doing this, 2% off, not too shabby,
No. Let me see. I have
That was a one-armed man patting himself on the back.
That's right. With my right arm. You just didn't see it.
on page, if I could, let's see, I'm on page 96. I need a refresher here. We had an amended budget. We had a budget of 200. I'm on page, let me blow this up. Can't see it. I'm on page 96, item 135-69005-30, capital outlays, 280,000. The current month, we spent 40,000. My question, we're only at 14% of budget. Can somebody tell me what that was? That we had 280,000 laid against it in admin. This isn't administration. Was that
A big portion of
renovation
that's
here?
going to be the boardroom is going to be part of this. That's going to be all the upgrades to the boardroom. I can
Okay.
pull up the budget here and tell you everything. I know the budget software is in there.
Okay,
We're up and running now. We just now currently paid it, which I think is going to actually be in this current month, not March.
Security's all been in admin too, even though it affects the water and wastewater side.
okay. That's probably what it was. I just could not recall what it was that we were talking about. Okay. me flip on through these, looking for more yellow marks. Oh, we repaired I'm on page 118 now. Pump for lift station number 9. Lift station number 9. Did we just repair it or did we replace it? What?
I've been told, and I do not recall,
Oh, that's an honest answer.
so.
Okay. I was just thinking if it's been replaced, then maybe it should be out of a capital depreciation reserve.
Oh, understood. We're also budgeting for replacement of all of those over the next 5 years.
Okay.
And to make sure that we have adequate spares. So in this year's capital budget, we had budgeted for some spare part purchases for the new wastewater plant, but we had not done so for lift station backups. And we had found some, all of the lift stations have 2 pumps. One is primary and one is backup. And we had found a couple that had been just down to 1 pump for a while when we had our last leadership change there in the wastewater group. So I've been pushing for that, and in next year's budget, you'll see a plan over 5 years to make sure that we have adequate backups for all of our lift stations.
Okay, great.
Do you want to relate that we had a few other software, the GIS and the asset management systems also, and the admin side of the budget for the capital?
Okay. That's the only questions I had. A motion?
I move to approve the March 2019 combined financials and variance report, combined financials, combined variance report.
I'll second.
Motion and a second to move the combined financial variance reports. Any further discussion? All in favor signify by raising your hand. Opposed, same sign. Motion passes unanimously. Updates.
Thank you. I guess I would just, we're sitting here listening to revenue suppression as it happens.
That's rain, exactly.
So, in your board packet, you'll find my my general manager report. I'll draw your attention to the regulatory update. We had an unusual item occur in the sense that we had a foam overflow at the wastewater plant. In the spirit of a good golfer's attitude, we call our own penalties. We called and talked to the folks at TCEQ and said we've had a foam overflow. It was not a liquid overflow, but an overflow of foam from the basins. There was a picture included in the report to that effect. Technically, it's not clear whether that's a violation and an SSO or just simply a process disruption at the plant. It was contained on site, never made it off the plant site. We went ahead and reported it after consulting with the TCEQ folks, saying, we don't know that this is an SSO, but we're going to go ahead and submit the document. Whether they record it as such, I guess, remains to be seen, but we went ahead and talked to them about it. In the same light, I put in some information for you all about filamentous sludge bulking bacteria, which I'm sure you found to be a great interest, and maybe even reread some sections of it. But not everybody knows about nocardia and sludge bulking foams. It's apparently a problem in Texas, this part of Texas, for many, many years. In fact, our plant prior to the upgrade was written up for having excess nocardia foams at a time when we had clarifiers. So when you were trying to separate sludge in the old days, you used gravity to settle it out. And these bacteria are long and stringy, and they tend to rise to the top, so it's hard to get them to settle. And in the old days then, that was a violation from TCEQ's point of view. I would argue that today it's really more of an aesthetic concern. It doesn't look very pleasant, but it's hardly indicative of the water quality leaving the plant. We're still getting zeros on bacteria most days, and the water coming out is crystal clear. It's crystal clear. It's amazing water. I've never seen better water leave a wastewater plant in my career, and I'm getting a little bit long in the tooth. So I wanted to include that so you could see a little bit of information about that. We worked through the troubleshooting process on that. We had some, hiccups as we learned to operate our new plant and get into the steady state mode there. For example, we had 2 basins that had a lot of foam. The operators were concerned about it overflowing, and so they actually just turned those basins off until we could figure out what to do about it. Then on one day, after Mike encouraged the addition of air to those basins that had been turned out, which we did for a few minutes, we had a pretty significant odor complaint come from the plant, because if you turn a basin out of service and let it sit with no oxygen for a day or two, it goes septic. And so then when you put a little bit of air to it, it creates an amazing outbreak of olfactory disturbance. So anyway, that's happened, and I put it in the report just to be open, and anybody who wants to read it can see that we did report that. Outside of that, I really don't have anything else, other than I'm happy to try to answer any questions you might have. On the water report, Mike's not with us tonight, so I'll have to wing it if it goes to that.
Questions from the board? No. I have a question on failure occurred on the first installed crane serving equipment, basins 1 and 2. Is that crane still down, and where are we at on it?
That crane, as I understand it, was repaired yesterday or today, but it's not. I have not heard a report that it's functional. When we had Kubota out, they pulled sample membranes out of basin number 1, basin number 3, and basin number 5. For 3 and 5, we knew that we did not have the new crane accepted. So we've still not accepted it from the contractor. So we rented a crane with the intent of pulling those membrane samples out. They've been sent to Japan. They're trying to make sure that everything's working properly on those items. We had to use that crane that we rented to pull the one on 1 and 2 as well. So I just received the bill for that today. The rental of that crane was like $2,900. And we certainly intend to back charge our contractor for the failure of the item on number 1 and 2 anyway. So we'll have to kind of split that cost into 2/3, 1/3. And it'll be communicated with them. It's my understanding they were out there and got it operational again today, but I can't verify that for sure.
We went ahead and cleaned the rest of the, emptied 2 basins, correct?
3.
3 basins. Did we notice anything about those lower filters, anything unusual about them, right? You guys?
No, except that we expected to find more debris in basin number 1, which has been in service the longest. It turned out it was fine down there. So we got in, we did an extensive cleaning according to Kubota's recommended protocol. So this was actually an external cleaning in the sense that we valve off the membrane area of the plant. We put in some concentrated hypochlorite, which, when I say that, it's less concentrated than household bleach, but more concentrated than what we use for clean-in-place cleaning for the membranes. And we bubbled it for a couple hours. The membranes responded well, and when we brought it back into service, they're performing much better than they were before. We did find a couple of the aerator heads. There's literally hundreds of those in the 5 basins, had lost their cover, so we had to replace those. It's the diffuser cap that goes on it. So it is an annual requirement to get in there, clean them out, make sure there's no breaks in the equipment. If there's a break in a diffuser nozzle, you can see it because all the air comes out in that one place. So it was a good exercise to work through that. What we did find is that to reseed the basins, right? So you drain one out, you pump it back to the head of the plant, you want to start over. Well, you can't just put raw sewage in there. You got to put some bugs in there with it. We went and rented the pump that Weber Cadagua used to do the same procedure. It's probably going to end up, and it's not an inexpensive pump, but it's probably going to end up as that's a regular annual maintenance item, that we're going to recommend purchasing one of those just to have at the plant. It would also be useful for pump arounds if we have a sewer collapse, other types of activities. But in the case of the regular maintenance of the plant, I think we're gonna end up recommending that we buy one of those.
Okay. Okay, I can remember back in an early discussion, we were talking about that plant with Keevan about, talking about the number of basins and how long it would take to bring a basin up in case we needed to have that capability. And I was thinking, oh, we could bring up a basin in a couple hours. Wrong answer. You gotta, it has to seed and come up to speed. It's not a quick thing.
Although I would say that I wanna say 36 hours was probably the longest it took from the time it was drained to bring it back into service.
Whole operation?
We cleaned it up. Now we put half of the wastewater in from a different active basin.
Well, that's what I understand. You have to
Yeah.
kind of seed it and
So,
feed it to
yeah.
get it going.
Yep. So,
So 36 hours is
not
pretty
bad,
good.
but we
No.
had to go rent that pump, and that's part of the expense.
I have one other question, and that comes on page 174. We have an anomaly here. And the anomaly is that we pumped 39.773 million gallons and billed for 40.421 million gallons, a difference of 648,000 gallons. I think I've only seen this once or twice before. Can somebody explain this to me?
It's not like taking a couple of fish and a couple loaves of bread and feeding a crowd, right?
Yeah, it's like, wait a minute, we sold more water than we pumped.
That would be something, this is off of Mike's report. I
Okay.
can tell you on the UB side, the financial side here, on what our hard number is for March. We have, the actual number was 40,427,000.
Okay,
Now, I take out things as in, there's certain things like temporary meters if I don't count because that's not something I look at budgeting wise.
okay,
But that's the numbers that we build for the UB side on those.
yeah. I just wondered didn't understand how it'd be a whoosh across or exactly what it was, but it definitely caught my attention.
Yeah,
Okay.
I can relate that to Mike and I'll talk to him and see if there's a simple answer for that or is that something a little more complicated on on the why, because it doesn't happen very often, as you can tell.
That's all I've got. Anything else around the dais?
I would like to say on the financial side that the bonds have finished up today and the wires were all approved today, so all that's been handled now. So they should all be in by tomorrow, the beginning of business day tomorrow, for the funds, and I've created new taxable accounts for the new bond that we have.
Fantastic. Thank you. Item 9, executive session. Are we going into executive session?
I see no reason to go into executive session unless our council suggests otherwise. I think we've covered everything we needed to cover.
Board, any reason to go to executive session?
That I can see.
None seen, will not do that. Item 9 and item 10 are passed. Item 11, consider and take appropriate action on matters delivered in executive session. We did not go, so there's no action on that. Item 12, items for future agendas. Board. Nothing. Nothing for a future agenda. Set future meeting dates. Projected regular board meeting Monday, May 20th, 2019 at 6:30 PM. Any discussion on that? Nope, no discussion. Any further items from the board? Stand waiting for motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Second,
I'll second.
all in favor, signify by raising your hand. Oh, that's fine, I got 3 votes. You can vote no.
I could sit here all,
Opposed?
I could sit here all night long.
Okay, opposed? No opposed. We stand adjourned at 7:44 PM.
Still the missing president. This was pretty crisp, you know, just